His hands wiped a wrench on a dark, oil-stained cloth. The motion was slow, steady, unhurried. Each metal groove was cleaned before the wrench was hung on the pegboard in its rightful place, where a faded marker outline had been traced the first year he opened the shop. Cole Donovan was 39 years old. His hands were not young. There were small scars across his knuckles, old cuts long since healed, calluses on his palms, a map of 11 years as a systems engineer and 4 years holding a wrench every day. In the right corner of the shop, behind a steel workbench, a little girl sat on a blue plastic chair. Hazel was 6, missing a front tooth, her brown hair in 2 uneven pigtails. Cole had done them this morning, and he still wasn't very good at it. On her lap was a worn coloring book, its pages filled with colors that never stayed within the lines. Beside her, on another chair, sat a white stuffed rabbit named Mochi. Mochi was missing an eye, and its left ear had been sewn back on with black thread. Cole had done that on a rainy night 2 years ago, when Hazel couldn't sleep without Mochi beside her. "Hazel, it's time for your snack." Cole placed a yogurt cup and a small spoon on the table next to his daughter. She looked up, her smile revealing the gap between her teeth, and said, "Daddy, I drew an elephant today." "Let me see." Hazel held up the page. The elephant was purple with 4 uneven legs and a long, squiggly trunk. "It's beautiful," Cole said, and he really meant it. 4 years ago, Cole Donovan didn't have a repair shop. He didn't have a wrench in his hand. He had an ID badge hanging from his neck, an office on the 17th floor of Crestra Industrial Systems, and a paycheck most people would trade 10 years of their lives for. He was the lead systems engineer. 11 years, 7 patents to his name. The precision control systems he designed were running in factories across 7 states. Then Claire passed away. The illness was fast. 4 months from diagnosis to the day she was gone. Hazel was 18 months old. Cole was on a business trip when he got the call. He doesn't remember how he made it home. He just remembers holding Hazel in his arms, and she was too young to understand what had happened. But it was like she still knew her mommy wasn't coming back. He quit his job within 60 days. It wasn't because he couldn't go on. He could have. But he looked at Hazel and he saw a child who had already lost her mother. He couldn't let her lose anything else. Not his time, not his presence, not the evenings when her dad came home late. He chose the repair shop. He chose small. He chose simple. No one in this neighborhood knew about the 7 patents. No one knew he used to design the systems that billion-dollar corporations ran on. They only knew a quiet man who opened his doors at 7 a.m., who had a little girl that often sat coloring in the corner of his shop, and whose craftsmanship was second to none. The bell on the door chimed. Cole glanced at the clock on the wall. 4:55 p.m., 5 more minutes, and he'd be locking up and taking Hazel home. But this bell wasn't a regular customer. Regulars knew his closing time. He wiped his hands and walked to the front. A black Bentley was parked out front, custom plates, tinted windows. A door opened, and a woman stepped out. Black leather heels, a long charcoal coat, phone in her hand, her eyes not on the shop, but on her screen. Behind her, a man in a suit emerged from the passenger seat, and another one followed. An entourage. The woman looked up at the sign above the door. Donovan Repair and Machining. The letters were hand-painted, faded, and rusted at the corners. She smirked. It wasn't a real smile. Just a slight, quick, almost unconscious curl of her lips. The kind of smirk that escapes between perfectly painted lips without asking for permission. The kind of smirk meant to be noticed by those standing closest. Her entourage noticed. The driver noticed. The 2 men in suits flanking her noticed, and they looked away, because that was the proper response when their CEO found something beneath her. Inside the shop, Hazel was holding Mochi and looking through the dusty glass of the door. "Daddy, there's a lady." Cole placed a hand on his daughter's shoulder, gently guiding her behind the workbench. "You stay here with Mochi, okay? I'm just going to step outside for a minute." Hazel nodded. She didn't ask any more questions. She had learned very early on that when her dad said, "Stay here," it meant something was happening, and her job was to trust him. Cole walked to the door. The woman had put her phone away. Now she was looking straight at him. Gray eyes, sharp and cold, the kind of gaze that was used to people looking down when she looked at them. "Are you Cole Donovan?" "I am." Her eyes scanned him from head to toe. A gray work shirt, sleeves rolled to the elbows, old black trousers, worn down safety boots. "I'm Veronica Ashford. CEO of Ashford Precision Metals. Cole nodded. He knew the name. Everyone in the industry knew that name. The third largest manufacturer of precision metal components on the East Coast, worth $2.7 billion. Your shop is different than I imagined, she said. Her tone wasn't a compliment. A shop is for working, not for looking at, Cole replied. Veronica looked at him for another second. Then she walked past him, inside. She looked around. Tools hung in neat rows. The floor was clean. A little girl sat in the corner with a stuffed rabbit. Veronica blinked, as if she'd just seen something that didn't belong in the picture she had in her mind. "You have a daughter?" she asked. Her voice held no real interest. "I have a daughter. And she sits here while you work. She's here when I don't have a sitter." Veronica nodded, a short clipped nod that ended the topic. She pulled out her phone, opened a photo, and showed it to Cole. "My line is down. Production line 2. The entire control system is frozen. 3 national contractors all quoted at least 3 days. I can't wait 3 days." Cole looked at the photo. His eyes scanned the details quickly. A section of a circuit board, a string of error codes. He'd seen these codes before. 9 years ago, back when he was at Crestridge, he had designed a similar system. "I'll come," Cole said. He didn't ask about the fee. He didn't boast about his past. He didn't mention that he was the one who had designed the very thing she needed fixed. He just picked up his toolbox and turned to Hazel. "Daddy has to go to work for a little while. You'll stay with our neighbor, okay?" Hazel hugged Mochi, looking up at her father. "Where are you going, Daddy?" Cole knelt, looking into his daughter's eyes. "Daddy's going to go help someone." The little girl nodded, stood up and took Cole's hand. He walked her to the door and handed her over to Mrs. Baker next door. She had watched Hazel hundreds of times, never asking why, just opening the door in her arms to the child. Veronica was already back in her car. She didn't wait for Cole. She didn't look back. Cole placed his toolbox on the passenger seat of his 11-year-old Ford truck. He got behind the wheel, looking through the windshield at the idling Bentley in front of him. White smoke from its exhaust pipe rose into the cold, late afternoon air. He started the engine. The engine roared to life, not the roar of a supercar, but the sound of an old but reliable machine, much like the man himself. Cole Donovan drove out of the alley, following the black Bentley toward the factory of the woman who had just laughed in his face. He didn't know that in his jacket pocket, an old note from 2 years ago was still a number, an address, a plan that had never been put into action. Today, everything was about to change, for him and for her. And for the child sitting in Mrs. Baker's house, holding a stuffed rabbit with one missing eye, believing her father could fix anything in the world. Cole Donovan parked his silver-gray Ford truck next to the factory fence. Beside him were the cars of the senior management team, Mercedes, BMWs, Lexuses, and the black Bentley parked in the most central spot. His truck looked like an ugly smudge on a glossy black canvas. He turned off the engine and sat in silence for a moment. Through the windshield, a polished steel sign gleamed. Ashford, Prikishy, Meadles, East-T, 1997, and below it in smaller letters, proud partner of the United States defense industry. A $2.7 billion enterprise. One of the 3 largest precision component manufacturers on the East Coast. Those numbers didn't intimidate Cole. He had worked with bigger numbers than that. But something else gave him pause. An indescribable feeling, as if something was waiting for him inside those walls. Something that would change everything. Cole opened the truck door. His old work boots touched down on the clean concrete of the guest parking lot. He slung his toolbox over his shoulder, locked the truck, and walked toward the main entrance. The automatic glass doors slid open. Inside was a lobby as large as his entire workshop. The black and white marble floor was polished so brightly that Cole could see his own face reflected at his feet. A black granite reception desk stood in the center, and behind it sat a young woman in a gray uniform, her hair in a tight bun, wearing a smile practiced hundreds of times over. "I have an appointment," Cole said. The woman looked him over. From his slightly messy hair, down to his gray shirt faded from countless washes, to his old trousers, his work boots, and finally his grease-stained toolbox. "Why haven't you changed?" A voice called out from behind him. Cole turned around. A man was walking out of an adjacent hallway, tall, thin, wearing a tailored black suit with an elegant blue tie. In his right hand, he held an iPad. In his left, a coffee from a brand Cole had never heard of. He looked to be about 40, but his face was younger. The kind of young that comes from never having had to worry about anything truly important. "You're Cole Donovan?" the man asked. His tone wasn't a question. It was a statement laced with disappointment. "I'm Cole Donovan. I'm Derek Manning, Chief Financial Officer. Ms. Ashford was called away, so I'll be handling this." Derek didn't extend a hand to shake. He swiped at his iPad, not looking at Cole. All three national contractors quoted at least 3 days, one quoted 5. Derek finally looked up. His eyes scanned Cole from head to toe, slowly, deliberately. "You're the last one on the list. Walt, our plant manager, said you used to work at Crestridge. Is that true?" "It is." "And you quit to do what exactly?" Derek glanced at his iPad. "Stay home with your daughter?" Cole looked Derek straight in the eye. He could see the contempt there, not the loud kind, but a more sophisticated sort, the kind cultivated over years of standing above other people and believing it was deserved. "I stay home with my daughter," Cole said, his voice even. Derek let out a small laugh, a quick, insincere smile. "How nice. Well, you're here now anyway." Derek turned and started down the hall. "Follow me, and don't touch anything until I tell you to." The hallway was long and wide. On either side were floor-to-ceiling glass walls, revealing conference rooms, each with a long table, leather chairs, and wall-mounted screens. Cole saw people in suits sitting inside, pens in hand, eyes fixed on documents. They watched him as he walked past, a man with a grease-stained toolbox, as out of place as a crow among a flock of peacocks. A woman in a meeting room saw Cole, and she looked longer than the others. She was about 35 years old with long brown hair, wearing a gray blazer. Her eyes held no contempt. They held something else, curiosity and perhaps a hint of concern. She was Nina Holloway, Veronica Ashford's personal assistant. She had seen everyone who came to this factory over the past 4 years. Executives from major corporations, consultants with $100,000 fees, engineers from Germany and Japan. She had never seen anyone who looked like Cole Donovan. And there was one thing she knew that Derek didn't. The name Cole Donovan had appeared in an old report she'd read 2 years ago. A report on 7 patents granted. To a Crestridge engineer, patents, she discovered, were being used on Ashford's very own production line. She didn't mention it to Derek. She wanted to see what would happen. Derek led Cole through 2 hallways, down a flight of stairs and into a vast space, the main production floor. The temperature here was at least 10 degrees hotter than outside. The smell of machine oil, metal, and the sweat of workers who had put in a 12-hour shift. The machinery was silent, not a normal silence, but the silence of death. Dozens of production lines were paralyzed. Conveyor belts stood still. Robotic arms were bowed as if in prayer. Standing in the middle of this area, an older man was staring at a control panel. He wore faded blue overalls with a name embroidered on the chest. Walt, 22 years. His face was filled with the wrinkles of a man who had seen too many things break. "Walt," Derek called out, his voice dry. "The guy you called for is here." Walt turned around. His eyes met Cole's, and Cole immediately saw the difference. Walt didn't look at him the way Derek did. Walt looked at him with the curiosity of one old craftsman for another. "You Cole Donovan?" "I'm Cole Donovan." Walt stepped forward, holding out his hand. Cole shook it. Walt's hand was large, rough, and calloused, the hand of a man who had held a wrench long before Derek Manning learned to hold a pen. "I've heard about you," Walt said, his voice deep and warm. 10 years ago, there was an engineer at Crestridge. They said he could fix anything." "I only fix what I understand," Cole said. Derek stood to the side, arms crossed, looking at his watch. "All right, we're wasting time." Derek pointed toward the control panel. "This is the system. It's been frozen since 3 a.m. Our tech team has tried everything. You have 2 hours. If you can't fix it, we're calling someone else." Cole said nothing. He set his bag down and unzipped it. Inside were neatly arranged tools, each in its place, no different from the pegboard in his own workshop. Walt looked at the tool bag and his eyes lit up. He'd seen enough expensive kits from maintenance engineers to know that the way a man organized his tools said a lot about him. Cole walked over to the control panel. He didn't touch anything right away. He stood before it, hands at his sides, his eyes slowly taking in every component. Walt stood behind him, silent. Derek stood further away, on his phone, talking to someone about another meeting. 15 seconds passed. Then Cole began. He opened the electrical cabinet. His eyes scanned the circuit boards, the cables, the relays. His fingers touched each component lightly. Not to test, but to feel. Walt had seen many engineers work. None of them did it like this. You ever seen this system before? Walt asked. Cole didn't answer immediately. He was reading a string of error codes on a small screen, numbers flashing in red. 9 years ago, Cole said finally, I helped design a version of it for Crestridge. They sold the license to someone. Walt nodded, asking no more questions. Cole continued to work. His hands moved quickly, precisely like a musician playing a piece he knew by heart. He removed a circuit board, checked the solder points, and reattached it. He plugged a probe into a port no one had noticed, reading the signal on a handheld device. Derek finished his call. He walked closer. Well, are you done yet? Not yet, Cole said without looking up. Derek sighed. He turned to Walt. Are you sure about this guy? I can call the team from Ohio. They said they could be here within 48 hours if I pay double. Walt looked at Derek. There was something in his eyes that Derek couldn't read, weariness, contempt, and a hint of pity. Walt said slowly, I've worked here for 22 years. I've seen at least 7 engineering teams come and go. I've never seen anyone work like this man. Let him work. Derek pursed his lips. He looked at his watch again, then his phone, then Cole. 2 hours, Derek said. You have 1 hour and 45 minutes left. He turned his back, walked away, phone pressed to his ear again. Cole didn't hear what Derek was saying. He only heard the sound of his own heart beating, steady, slow, focused. And he heard another sound, a tiny whine, almost imperceptible, coming from somewhere deep within the core of the circuit board. Cole had heard that sound before. 9 years ago in a Crestridge lab, when a young colleague had accidentally created a nearly undetectable feedback loop. But this wasn't an accident. He placed his hand on the circuit board, and a thought crossed his mind, a thought he wouldn't share with anyone just yet. Someone did this on purpose. Cole looked toward the doorway where Derek Manning had just disappeared, and he was starting to understand. Outside, on the 4th floor corridor, Veronica Ashford stood before the glass window, looking down at the parking lot. She saw the silver gray truck parked next to a Bentley. She saw the man with the tool bag get out, and she thought about what Derek had told her that morning. A repairman from some little shop. Walt says he's good. But you know how those people are. They're only good in their little workshops. Veronica didn't answer Derek. She didn't care if he was good or not. All she cared about was the production line, the contract with the Department of Defense, and the numbers on the quarterly report. She turned away from the window, picked up her coffee, and walked into the conference room where the directors were waiting. She didn't know that on the ground floor, a single father in worn-out shoes was standing in front of her control panel, and his fingers had just touched something that would change all of their fates. Cole Donovan didn't take his eyes off the circuit board for the next 47 minutes. It wasn't the focus of someone who was trying. It was the focus of a man who had been in this state 1,000 times before, a state where time lost all meaning, where the outside world shrank to a single point, and only the problem in front of him existed. Walt stood 3 steps away from him, not saying a word. He had seen many engineers in his 22 years, but no one had ever made him feel like he was watching an artist at work. Cole plugged the probe into another port. The handheld device's screen displayed a string of numbers. He looked, read, then plugged it in again, and then into another port. Each time the string of numbers changed in a predictable way. But there was an anomaly, a small signal, a fluctuation, something that didn't belong. Cole stood up straight. Walt, do you have the system schematics? Yes, but they were last updated 6 years ago. After that, we made a few small changes, and the tech team never fully documented them. Let me see them. Walt walked to a filing cabinet in the corner of the room, opened the 3rd drawer, and pulled out a thick blue folder with a worn, frayed cover. He placed it on the table next to Cole. Cole opened it. His eyes scanned the schematic pages at a speed that made Walt squint to keep up. He wasn't reading the words. He was reading the structure. He was looking for connection points, junctions, places where a signal could be diverted. On page 17, he stopped. Here, Cole said, his finger pointing to a spot on the diagram, junction J7. What's it connected to? Walt leaned in to look. His eyes widened. Nothing. That junction was disabled during the 2018 upgrade. It's not in use anymore. It's being used, Cole said. Walt fell silent. Cole turned back to the circuit board. He found the location of junction J7. A small connection port, buried deep in the board, almost impossible to see unless you knew exactly where to look. A thin gray cable was plugged into it, a cable that wasn't in any of the documents, not recorded in any maintenance report. Cole gently unplugged the cable. Instantly, the main control panel screen changed. The flashing error codes vanished. A new string of numbers appeared. Walt stood frozen. How did you know? Cole didn't answer right away. He was looking at the gray cable in his hand. It wasn't a standard cable. It was sheathed in a special casing, the kind used only in military-grade systems or in industrial systems designed for remote interference. Someone plugged this in, Cole said. It wasn't a glitch. It was intentional. Walt swallowed hard. He'd worked at this factory long enough to know there were secrets hidden in the basements, phone calls made after hours, decisions made without a paper trail. But he never thought he'd witness something like this. Who has after-hours access to this area? Cole asked. Walt thought for a moment. The maintenance crew, a few people from management, and he paused. And who? Mr. Manning, Derek Manning. Cole nodded. He wasn't surprised. From the moment he'd stepped into this building, from the way Derek had looked at him, from the way Derek talked about those people and little workshops, Cole knew the man in front of him wasn't just an arrogant CFO. He was someone hiding something. Can you keep quiet about this? Cole asked Walt. Walt looked at him. Understanding flickered in his old eyes. Mr. Manning's been here for 5 years, Walt said. In those 5 years, a lot of strange things have happened. Contracts canceled. Suppliers changed. Good employees fired for no clear reason. I've seen it all, but I had no proof. And when a guy like me speaks up without proof, they just say I'm old, that I don't understand business strategy. Walt paused for a moment. I'll keep my mouth shut. But what about you? What are you going to do with this? Cole looked at the cable in his hand. I'm going to keep it. He slipped the cable into his jacket pocket, next to the old piece of paper with the number and address on it. Outside, Derek Manning was standing in the hallway, phone in hand, his eyes peering through the small glass window into the control room. He had been standing there for the last 5 minutes, watching Cole and Walt. He couldn't hear what they were saying, but he could see their body language. Walt was standing still. Cole was hunched over the control panel. Derek felt that something was wrong to model. He swiped on his phone, opening an app no one else in the company knew about. The screen showed a remote dashboard. A green indicator light was blinking. Then the light went out. Derek froze. The cable had been pulled. He glanced through the glass again. Cole was standing straight, holding something gray in his hand, but he couldn't see it clearly. Walt was standing next to Cole, his expression unreadable. Derek turned and strode down the hall, heading for the stairwell. He needed somewhere quiet. He needed to think. He had planned this for months. The system would crash at the most critical moment. The big contractors would quote high prices and long timelines. And then he would propose an alternative contractor, a company registered under a friend's name, with a competitive price and a faster turnaround. He'd get a 5% kickback on every invoice. He'd done this 3 times before. No one ever found out. But this time, Walt had called someone else. Someone who wasn't part of the plan. Someone whose eyes looked through a circuit board as if they were reading a book. Derek slammed his fist into the wall. His hand throbbed, but that pain was nothing compared to the ache in his chest. If Cole found out the truth, if he told Veronica, if there was an investigation, he pulled out his phone and dialed a number. The line rang 4 times before someone picked up. We need to talk, Derek said, his voice a whisper. There's a problem. At plant number 2. Silence. I'll call you back, the voice on the other end said, cold as ice. Not now. The call ended. Derek stood in the dark stairwell, sweat trickling down his spine. He'd never been this scared. Not because he might lose his job. He was scared because he knew the person on the other end of the line, his trusted friend, wouldn't let anyone threaten their plan. Not even him. Back in the control room, Cole had already started putting everything back together. He worked faster now that the main issue had been identified. The gray cable was disconnected. The error codes were gone. Now he just needed to restart the system and check each component. Walt stood beside him, helping where needed. Neither of them mentioned the cable. Neither of them mentioned Derek. But they both knew they had just stumbled upon something that could bring down an entire corporation. Walt, Cole said, not looking up. Do you know about the Fairhaven plant? Walt was silent for a long moment. I do. It was shut down. Why? Walt sighed. He looked out the window toward the horizon, where an old building was hidden behind the newer factories. Because they said it wasn't efficient anymore. But I worked there for 10 years before transferring here. It was efficient. It was efficient right up until the day they closed it. Walt turned back to look at Cole. Someone wanted it dead, and they killed it. Cole pressed the start button. The production line shuddered to life. The sound of machinery began to fill the air, faintly at first, then growing louder, until it became the familiar hum of a system waking from a coma. Walt watched the conveyor belts begin to move. His old eyes shone with something between relief and sorrow. Thank you, Walt said. Cole closed his tool bag. Don't thank me. Just make sure that cable never finds its way back. He slung the bag over his shoulder and walked out of the control room. The hallway outside was quiet, but as he rounded a corner, he saw a woman standing at the end of the hall, holding a cup of coffee, her eyes fixed on him. It wasn't Veronica Ashford. It was the woman from the boardroom, the one who had watched him longer than the others. She walked toward him. Are you Cole Donovan? I am. She held out her hand. I'm Nina Holloway, Miss Ashford's assistant. Cole shook her hand. It was small, but her grip was firm. The handshake of someone who had learned to survive in a world of powerful men without losing herself. I know you found something, and Nina said, her voice low. Just enough for the two of them to hear. And I think you also know that Mr. Manning isn't the only one. Cole looked at her. What do you know? Nina glanced around, then pulled Cole into a hidden corner where there were no cameras. I have a copy of the property valuation report from last year. The Fairhaven plant was valued at $18 million. It was sold for $11 million. She paused. And the buyer was a shell company, which, as far as I can tell, belongs to a friend of Mr. Manning's. Cole was silent. That number, $11 million, matched the figure on the piece of paper he was holding in his pocket. Why didn't you tell Mrs. Ashford? Because I have no proof, and because I don't know who's behind all of this. Nina looked Cole straight in the eye. But now, I think I've found someone who can help me find the truth. Cole didn't answer. He just nodded. Nina turned and walked away, leaving Cole standing in the quiet hallway with a gray cable in his pocket, a number in his head, and a name, Derek Manning. He knew this fight was just beginning. And this time, he wasn't just going to fix a machine. He was going to fix an entire system. Cole returned to the control room. The clock on the wall read 10:47 a.m. It had taken him 47 minutes to find the cause. Now he needed to fix it. Walt was standing at the central console, holding an old notebook, his eyes glued to the readouts. When Cole walked in, he looked up. Find anything else? Cole set his tool bag on the table. He unzipped it and took out a portable soldering kit, a specialized type that not every repair shop had. Walt looked at the kit and his eyes lit up. He had seen one like it once, 10 years ago, during a tour of a military contractor's factory. You carry that thing with you. I never know what I'm going to need, Cole said, opening the lid. Inside the circuit board, there were 3 cracked solder points. Not cracked from age, cracked by an abnormal current, the kind that only appears when a remote control signal is sent into the system through that gray cable. Cole began to solder. The tip of the soldering iron touched the circuit board, releasing a thin wisp of white smoke, the smell of rosin filling the air. Cole's hand was steady. Each solder joint was even, round, perfect. Not hot, not too cold, without a single stray bead of solder left behind. Walt stood and watched, saying nothing. He had seen many welders in his life, but none worked with the focus of a surgeon operating on a patient. Where did you learn to solder? Walt asked, though he suspected he wouldn't get an answer. Crestridge had a lab. I spent a lot of nights there. A lot of nights? Cole set the soldering iron down, inspecting the 3 joints under the light of a flashlight. When my daughter was asleep, I couldn't sleep much. Walt nodded. He understood, not because he had young children, but because he had seen enough men bring their private pain to work. Some chose alcohol, some chose silence. Cole chose work. Cole plugged the circuit board back into place. He powered it on for a test. The screen flickered. Once, twice. Then the numbers started to run. The string of red error codes vanished. In its place, green. The green of a system operating normally. Walt let out a breath. He hadn't realized he'd been holding it for the past 10 seconds. Nice work, he said. Cole didn't reply. He was checking every parameter, every reading, every signal. There could be no mistakes, no errors, because if there were, this time it wouldn't be a technical glitch, it would be evidence. 15 minutes later, Cole stood up straight. It's done. Walt looked at the clock. 11:47 a.m. 2 hours and 20 minutes. From the moment Cole set foot in the factory to the moment the line was ready to operate again. Do you want to take a break? Get something to eat? Walt asked. No, I need to get back to my daughter. Walt nodded. He didn't ask any more questions. A man with a 6-year-old daughter waiting at home, Walt understood that more than anything. Cole closed his tool bag. He walked out into the hallway, heading for the main entrance. But before he could get there, a door opened, and Veronica Ashford stepped out. She was on her phone, but when she saw Cole, she leaned down to say a few words and then ended the call. Her eyes met Cole's. For the first time that day, she truly saw him. Walt had already reported that the system was fixed. She knew it before Cole even stepped into the hallway. Are you finished? She asked. There was no gratitude in her voice. It was the tone of someone checking to see if a task had been completed. It's done. Veronica nodded. She glanced at Derek, who was standing a few steps behind Cole. Derek stepped forward, holding an iPad. Looks like he actually did it, Derek said, his voice soft, as if praising a child for tying his own shoes. I've double-checked the readings. The system is running smoothly. Veronica said nothing. She turned to Cole. Thank you for coming. That sentence, 3 words, no more, no less. No apology for laughing in his face. No praise for fixing what 3 national contractors couldn't. Just 3 words, uttered with the cold efficiency of a CEO settling an invoice. Derek, standing beside her, couldn't keep his mouth shut. It's a good thing we found you, Derek said, turning to Veronica with a smug smile. Turns out that little shop of yours is useful after all. The prices from these small shops are always easier to swallow than the big contract firms. A nearby manager chuckled softly. Another looked down at the floor. Derek wasn't finished. Just think about it. If we'd signed a maintenance contract with one of those other companies, our quarterly costs would have shot up by at least 20%. Hiring these small shops once in a while is so much easier on the budget. Look at how much we're saving. Veronica said nothing. She was looking at her phone, scrolling through unread messages. Derek turned to Cole, as if wanting to end the conversation with a profound statement. How much are you charging? Cole gave him the number. It was a fair number, not too high, not too low, exactly what he would have charged any other client. Veronica didn't look up as she ordered Derek to process the payment. Derek nodded, took out his phone, and started tapping. Then Veronica spoke her final words. That'll be all. Thanks for coming on short notice. She looked up, meeting Cole's eyes one last time. If we have any smaller issues in the future, we'll be in touch. The word smaller landed in the middle of the room and just sat there. Derek smirked. The other 2 managers glanced at each other. One turned away. Cole looked Veronica straight in the eye. He wasn't angry. He wasn't disappointed. He was simply taking a reading, like an engineer noting a technical specification. Who she was, who she thought he was, and the distance between the 2. He said, "You're welcome." Then he turned and walked away. Walt caught up with Cole at the exit. He held out his hand and Cole shook it. A firm, 2-handed shake the way tradesmen do. I don't know what you're going to do next, Walt said, his voice low. But if you need anything, you have my number. Thank you, Walt. Walt looked at Cole for a moment longer. Then he said something he hadn't said to anyone in years. The Fairhaven plant. I was there the day it closed. 12 people were laid off. 6 of them were the best workers I've ever had. Walt paused. They said it wasn't efficient anymore. But the truth is, it was running fine, perfectly fine. There was just one problem. It was sitting on a piece of land someone wanted to buy for cheap. Cole didn't ask who that someone was. He already knew. He walked out the door, crossed the parking lot, and opened the door to his truck. He sat behind the wheel and let out a long breath. From his pocket, he pulled out the slip of paper, the one Derek had dropped earlier. Cole had picked it up without anyone noticing. On it was a number, $11,200,000, and a name, Fairhaven Asset Management, a company with no address, no website, no trace of its existence except for a single line in a sales contract. Cole placed the paper on the dashboard. He looked out the window toward the Ashford Precision Metals building gleaming in the sun. An $18 million asset sold for $11 million. A $7 million difference. $7 million that disappeared into someone's pocket. And the man who had laughed at him this morning, Derek Manning, was the one who signed that contract. Cole started the engine. He didn't know that in Veronica Ashford's office on the 4th floor, Nina Holloway was standing by the window, watching the silver gray truck leave the parking lot, holding a manila envelope. Inside was a complete copy of the Fairhaven transaction file. She had held on to it for almost a year, waiting, watching. And today she had seen the man who could help her do the right thing. The truck turned onto the main road, merging into the heavy traffic of Lowell, Massachusetts. Cole Donovan drove toward Mrs. Baker's house, where Hazel was waiting with Mochi in her arms, unaware that her father had just uncovered a conspiracy that could bring down a $2.7 billion corporation. Model. He wasn't thinking about that. He was thinking about Hazel. He was thinking about the picture of the purple elephant, and he thought about a question that had haunted him for the past 3 years. How do you build a future for your daughter when the richest people are stepping on each other to claim things they don't deserve? Today, he had his answer. He wouldn't just fix their machines. He would build something of his own. That evening, after Hazel was asleep, Cole sat in the kitchen with a long, cold cup of coffee. In front of him was his phone, and next to it, the slip of paper with the number $11,200,000 and the name Fairhaven Asset Management. He had been staring at those two things for 45 minutes. The clock on the wall read 9:47 p.m. Hazel had been put to bed at 8 after 3 fairy tales and 2 trips for water misses. Baker had sent a text. She was very good today, drew 2 more pictures, one for Daddy and one she's saving for someone special. Cole had tucked the drawing into his desk drawer, along with all the others Hazel had made over the past 3 years. Cole picked up his phone, opened his contacts, and dialed a number. The line on the other end rang 3 times. Cole? The voice was deep and warm, a little surprised but not overly so. You okay? Yes, Sam, I'm okay. Samuel Cross, Sam, was Cole's best friend from college. They had studied engineering together, shared an apartment for 4 years, pulled all-nighters before exams, and celebrated with beer when Cole got a full scholarship. After graduation, Sam went into finance, Cole into engineering. But they never drifted apart. 3 years ago, when Claire died, Sam was the first person by Cole's side. Not to offer empty platitudes, Sam came to clean the house, cook meals, and hold Hazel while Cole sat in the hospital filling out paperwork. Sam never talked about those days. But Cole knew he had canceled 3 important meetings to be there for him. Sam was now a private investor. He ran a small, quiet fund that didn't trade publicly, but those in the financial world knew that Sam Cross had the sharpest eye for undervalued assets. I need your advice on something, Cole said. What is it? Cole told him. Not everything, but enough. About Veronica Ashford, about the smile in his workshop, about Derek Manning and the taunts, about the trip to the factory, the system crash, the big cable, and the 3 cracked solder points, about the fallen slip of paper, the $11 million figure, and the name Fairhaven Asset Management, and finally about the Fairhaven factory. I want to buy it, Cole said. Silence on the other end of the line. Sam didn't ask why. Sam didn't ask if Cole had the money. He asked only one question. Have you done your research on it? I have, for the last 2 years. I have the full technical reports, asset appraisals, equipment lists, and a detailed restoration plan for every single item. How much capital will it take to get it running again? Cole gave him the number. A number that would make any investor hold their breath. Sam was silent for another 5 seconds. Are you sure about this, Cole? I've never been more sure of anything. I'm not asking about the numbers. I'm asking about you. Do you really want to do this? Because if you do, there's no going back to that quiet little workshop. There will be press. There will be competitors. There will be people who want to see you fail. And maybe, just maybe, there will be guys like Derek Manning trying to get in your way. Cole looked out the window. Outside, the city of Lowell was lighting up. Orange-yellow lights stretched to the horizon. Hazel is 6, Cole said. In 3 years, she'll be in the 3rd grade. In 9 years, she'll be in college. I can't keep building her future from this little workshop. I can fix anyone's machine, but I can't fix a world where men like Derek Manning are allowed to laugh in the faces of people who actually work. Not unless you build that world, Sam said. Not unless I build it. A long pause. I'll wire the money to your account tomorrow morning, Sam said. Not all of it. I'll need a few days to arrange the rest. But enough for you to make the down payment and start the legal process. Cole exhaled. He didn't realize he'd been holding his breath. Are you sure, Sam? That money? It's my money, Cole, and I can't think of a better way to use it. Sam's voice softened. You saved me once, remember? Third year of college, when I almost flunked out because of my grades. You sat with me for 2 solid months, going over every lesson, one by one, until I passed my exams. You never brought it up again, but I never forgot. That was different. No, Cole, it's the same thing. You're always helping people without ever asking for anything in return. Now, it's my turn. Cole didn't know what to say. He'd never been good at accepting help. But with Sam, he knew it was pointless to refuse. Thank you, Sam. Don't thank me. Just make it right. And call me when you need to. The call ended. Cole set the phone down on the table, turning to look at the piece of paper with the number $11,200,000 on it. It was no longer a threatening figure. It was a target. He walked into Hazel's room. She was asleep, one hand hugging Mochi, the other clutching the corner of her blanket. Her breathing was steady, gentle. On the wall above her bed, her drawings were taped in long flowers, animals, houses, and one special drawing. A tall man, a little girl, and a white rabbit. Cole sat on the edge of the bed, gently stroking his daughter's hair. Daddy's going to make a better world for you, he whispered. I promise. Hazel didn't wake up, but in her dream she smiled. The next morning, Cole called Arthur Pendleton, the lawyer who had handled his patents for years. Arthur was an older man whose office was in an old building in downtown Lowell, where the scent of old paper and walnut wood mingled in the air. He listened to Cole lay out his plan without a single interruption. When Cole finished, Arthur leaned back in his chair, staring at the ceiling for a long moment. You do realize you're planning to buy an asset from the very company owned by the woman who laughed at you, don't you? I know. And you know she won't be happy when she finds out? She won't be, but that's not my problem. Arthur nodded, a faint smile gracing his old face. I'll draw up the contract, but you'll need a legal entity to put it under. What are you going to name the company? Cole had thought about it all last night. Donovan Industrial. Donovan Industrial, Arthur repeated as if tasting each syllable. Concise, unadorned, just like you. He opened a new file, wrote the company name on the first page, and began to take notes. Cole stood up, shook Arthur's hand, and walked out of the office with a feeling he hadn't experienced in 3 years. It wasn't confidence, nor was it victory. It was serenity. He had chosen his path, and that path would lead him to Fairhaven. Nina Holloway had worked for Veronica Ashford for 4 years. 4 years sitting at the desk outside the glass door, answering phones, arranging meetings, drafting emails, and observing. She observed everything. It was the survival skill of a personal assistant. You had to know everything, but only say a tenth of it. For the past 4 years, Nina had seen Veronica Ashford at her best and at her worst. She had seen Veronica laugh with important clients, battle with rivals in negotiations, and cry only once after receiving the news of her mother's passing. Nina never told anyone about that. It was a secret she kept for Veronica, even though Veronica was never grateful for it. But 4 years was also long enough for Nina to see another truth. Veronica Ashford was being isolated, not by external enemies, but by the very people she trusted. Derek Manning was at the top of that list. When Derek was hired 5 years ago, he seemed to be a brilliant financial expert. Degrees from prestigious schools, work experience at 3 major corporations, and a confident demeanor that convinced Veronica he would help Ashford Precision Metals reach new heights. But Nina had seen other things. The after-hours phone calls, the off-the-books appointments, the contracts signed without going through the full approval process, and especially the sale of the Fairhaven factory. Nina had personally typed up the property valuation report for Fairhaven. The number was $18.4 million. She sent it to Derek to present to the board. A week later, Fairhaven was put up for sale at $11.2 million. Nina had asked Derek about the discrepancy. Derek looked at her with cold eyes and said, "There are market factors you wouldn't understand. Leave this to the adults." Nina didn't ask again, but she kept a copy of the report, and she had held on to it for the past 14 months. The morning after Cole Donovan left the factory, Nina arrived at the office earlier than usual. It was still dark when she parked her silver Honda Civic in the employee lot. She sat in her car for 5 minutes, looking through the windshield at the high-rise buildings slowly emerging in the dawn light. She had made her decision. There would be no more delays. Nina walked into the office at 6:47 a.m. She turned on her computer and opened the second drawer on the left, where she kept the manila folder, the one with no name on the cover. Inside was a copy of the Fairhaven valuation report, a copy of the sales contract, and a list of irregularities she had noted over the last 14 months. She began to write a memo, not a long letter, a short, precise, emotionless memo. She had learned to write that way from Veronica, the kind of document a CEO could read in 2 minutes and grasp the core issue. Nina typed, "To Veronica Ashford, Subject, review of Fairhaven asset sale transaction. Recommendation for independent audit. Contents. Valuation as of last March, 18.4 million US. Actual sale price in April, 11.2 million USD, a discrepancy of 7.2 million. Buyer, Fairhaven Asset Management, a shell company with no operational history. Sale approved by Derek Manning, though. Signing party for the buyer, identity unconfirmed. Recommendation, hire an independent auditing firm to review the entire asset sale process. Nina Holloway." She read it 3 times, corrected a few words, then printed it. The paper was still warm from the printer when she picked it up. Nina looked at it in her hand, a single white sheet, a few lines of black text, but within it lay a scandal that could shake an entire corporation. She placed the memo on Veronica's desk, right under her empty coffee mug. The first place Veronica would be sure to look when she came in. Then Nina sat down at her own desk, opened the appointment calendar, and started a normal workday. She didn't know that 15 minutes later, Derek Manning would walk past her desk and see the memo before Veronica had a chance to read it. Derek arrived at the office at 7:25 a.m., earlier than usual because he hadn't slept well after yesterday's phone call. He didn't usually walk past Nina's desk. Today, for some reason, he turned left instead of right, and he saw the piece of paper on Veronica's desk, unread, unmoved, still sitting under the coffee mug. Derek froze. He glanced around. No one was in the hallway. He stepped into Veronica's office, picked up the paper, and read. The color drained from his face. He folded the memo into quarters and slipped it into his jacket pocket. Then he turned and walked toward Nina's desk. Nina was focused on her screen, not paying attention. It wasn't until Derek was standing right in front of her that she looked up. "Mr. Manning?" Derek looked at her with eyes Nina had never seen before. It wasn't his usual contempt. It was something more dangerous, controlled panic. "Did you write this?" Derek asked, his voice a whisper. He pulled the memo from his pocket, holding it out in front of Nina. Nina's heart began to pound, but she kept her expression cold. "That is a matter between me and Ms. Ashford. Miss Ashford will not be reading it." Derek leaned down, his face just inches from hers. "And you will not be writing another one. Do you understand me?" "I don't know what you're talking about." "Oh, you will." Derek straightened up, adjusting his tie. "You have 2 choices, Nina. One, you keep your mouth shut, you continue doing your job, and everything will be fine. Or 2, you continue with this little game. And I will personally guarantee that you never find work in this industry again." He turned and walked away, leaving Nina motionless at her desk. She had known Derek was a bad person. She just hadn't realized how brazen he was. That afternoon, Nina found Cole Donovan's phone number. She didn't call right away. She stared at her phone screen for 15 minutes, her thumb hovering over the call button, but not pressing it. She thought about her mother, a nurse who had worked for 30 years in a public hospital, who always chose the poor patients over the rich ones, who always stood up for the underdog even when her superiors yelled at her for it. Her mother had taught her one thing. In this life, you'll have plenty of chances to stay quiet, but there will also be a few times when you have to speak up. Don't miss those moments. This was one of those moments. Nina pressed the call button. Cole Donovan speaking. "Mr. Donovan, this is Nina Holloway, Ms. Ashford's assistant. We met yesterday." There was a moment of silence. "I remember you. I need to talk to you, not over the phone. When can you meet?" "Tonight. 8 o'clock. There's a coffee shop on Merrimack Street. The Daily Grind. Do you know it?" "I know. I'll be there." The call ended. Nina put down her phone, letting out a long sigh. She had just crossed a line from which there was no turning back, and she knew that, from this moment on, Derek Manning wouldn't just be Cole Donovan's enemy. He would be hers. Nina Holloway had never been afraid of enemies. She was a nurse's daughter, and nurses never give up. Cole Donovan didn't tell anyone about his plan. It wasn't because he didn't trust them. He trusted Sam. He trusted Walt. He was even beginning to trust Nina Holloway, the woman who had met him at the coffee shop that night and handed him an envelope nearly 100 pages thick. Inside was Derek Manning's entire transaction history for the past 3 years. But Cole had learned a lesson from his years at Crestridge. The biggest plans needed to be kept the most secret. One wrong word could bring everything crashing down. So he remained silent. Silent when he returned to the workshop the next morning, opening the doors at 7 a.m., mopping the floors, organizing his tools, and waiting for customers. Silent when Hazel asked, "Dad, are you happy today?" And he just smiled, offering no explanation. Silent when Mrs. Baker checked in, when neighbors nodded. Hello, when old customers brought in their machines for repair, completely unaware that the man holding a wrench in front of them was about to become the owner of a factory worth tens of millions of dollars. Absolute silence. 3 weeks later, the contract to purchase the Fairhaven factory was signed. Arthur Pendleton had worked tirelessly during that time, negotiating with Ashford Precision Metals' legal team, exchanging dozens of emails, and revising every minor clause. None of those lawyers knew that the person behind the purchasing company, Donovan Industrial LLC, was the same man who had repaired their production line 3 weeks prior. All they saw was a newly formed company with no history, no public profile, and a reasonable price. On the day of the signing, Cole sat in Arthur's office, staring at the final page. Arthur handed him a pen, an old, heavy fountain pen made of black metal. "Do you want to read it over one last time?" Arthur asked. Cole shook his head. He had already read it 7 times in the last 3 days. Every clause, every number, every line of fine print. He understood it. He signed his name. Cole Donovan. Nothing fancy. No elaborate signature. Just 2 words, written quickly, evenly, precisely. The same way he wrote technical reports, the same way he organized his tools, the same way he lived his life. Arthur looked at the signature, nodded, and placed the contract in his safe. "Congratulations, young man," he said, a rare smile appearing on his aged face. "You just bought a factory." Handrail Lundersker. The first days at Fairhaven were anything but glamorous. Cole arrived at 5 a.m., before Hazel woke up, before Mrs. Baker came over, before anyone in Lowell had started their day. He opened the gate and stepped onto the 12-acre factory grounds, which had been abandoned for 14 months. It smelled of rusted iron, dried grease, of time and neglect. Dust half a centimeter thick coated every surface. Robotic arms were bowed as if in a sleep from which they would never awaken. The conveyor belts were still, the motors silent, the control panels as dark as dead computer screens. Cole stood at the main entrance, looking out over the vast space, and he began to visualize. He pictured production line 1 running here. He pictured the quality control area in that corner. He pictured a small office for Hazel, a place where she could sit and draw while he worked, where Mochi would have his own little chair. He got to work. The next 14 months were both the longest and shortest period of Cole Donovan's life. Long, because every day held 100 tasks to be done. Short, because when he looked up, Hazel had grown another centimeter, learned 10 new words, and drawn 200 more pictures. He still kept the small repair shop in the old neighborhood. He couldn't close it, as it was his only source of income in those early months. But every afternoon, after picking Hazel up from school and dropping her off with Mrs. Baker, he would drive to Fairhaven, work until 11 p.m., then go home, shower, and sleep for 4 hours before starting a new day. Sam called once a week. "Are you okay?" "Yes." "Do you need more money?" "Not yet." "Are you getting enough sleep?" Cole didn't answer that one. Walt showed up at Fairhaven in the 2nd month. He didn't say a word as he walked through the gate. He just looked around, saw Cole on his knees scrubbing grease off the floor, and then he took off his jacket, rolled up his sleeves, and started working. There was no contract, no salary agreement. Walt just said, "I'm retired, nothing to do at home. My wife told me to get out of the house." Cole nodded, and that was that. 6 former Fairhaven workers returned one by one. Not all at once. Each came at a different time, through Walt's introductions, through quiet phone calls in the night. They didn't ask about the salary. They just asked, "When do we start?" Cole replied, "Tomorrow." And they came. In the 6th month, Hazel's small office area was completed. Cole had built it with his own hands, painting the walls a pale yellow, the color Hazel chose, setting up a small desk, which he'd built from scrap wood, and hanging a corkboard on the wall for her to pin up her new drawings. Mochi got his own chair. A small doll's chair Cole had found at a second-hand store, old but still sturdy. When Hazel saw the room for the first time, she stood at the doorway for a long time, saying nothing. Then she ran to Cole and hugged him, squeezing so tightly he could feel every one of her breaths against his shoulder. "You're amazing, Dad," Hazel whispered. Cole hugged his daughter, saying nothing. He didn't need any other praise. In the 12th month, the first production line was ready for a test run. It was an October morning, the sky was clear, the temperature just right, the kind of weather people say is perfect for starting something new. Cole stood before the main control panel, his hand hovering over the start button. Walt stood beside him, clutching his old notebook. 6 workers stood behind them, hands clasped, their eyes fixed on the assembly line. Hazel sat in her little yellow room, a crayon in her hand, but she wasn't drawing. She was looking out the window towards her father. Cole pressed the button. The line shuddered. A small sound, then it grew louder. Then it became the steady hum of a perfectly operating machine. The conveyor belts began to move. Robotic arms extended, turning left, then right, as if greeting their new masters. The first metal components dropped into the inspection tray. Walt picked one up, holding it under the light. His eyes widened. The tolerance was only 0.002 millimeters, 30% more precise than the industry standard. He turned to Cole. "We did it." Cole nodded. He didn't smile. He just exhaled, a long, soft breath of relief, as if he'd been holding his breath for the past 14 months. Hazel ran out of her small room and hugged Cole's leg. "Daddy, I hear the machine. It makes such a happy sound." Cole bent down and lifted her into his arms. "That's the sound of the future, sweetheart." Hazel didn't understand. She just knew her dad was happy, and that made her happy too. Cole set her down and turned to Walt and the workers. They were standing in a circle around the line, each holding one of the first components, turning it over in their hands as if it were a treasure. In their eyes, it was a treasure. Not because of the value of the metal, but because they had built this together from ruins, from 14 months of silence, from sleepless nights and days with no guarantee of success. Cole stepped outside under the clear sky of Lowell, Massachusetts. He pulled out his phone and called Sam. "The machines are running." There was silence on the other end. Then Sam spoke, his voice thick with emotion. "I knew you would do it. It's not over yet. There's still a lot to do. But you've started." Cole hung up. He looked into the distance, where he could see the rooftops of Lowell stretching to the horizon. Somewhere among those rooftops was the Ashford Precision Metals building, where Veronica Ashford was sitting in her luxurious office, completely unaware that the man she once dismissed as a small matter had just officially become her competitor. Cole went back inside. There was still so much to do, but this time he wasn't doing it alone. The first news came on a Tuesday morning, via a concise email from the Department of Defense's contracting office. Veronica Ashford was sitting at her desk, coffee cup in hand, her eyes reading the words on the screen. It was only 3 sentences, but each one felt like a knife. Ashford Precision Metals has not been selected as the supplier for contract batch number XT47 for the upcoming fiscal year. The decision was based on an assessment of production capacity and delivery reliability. "We have selected another partner." Veronica read it 3 times. Her hand began to tremble slightly, not from fear but from fury. That contract was worth $47 million. It accounted for nearly 15% of Ashford's annual revenue, and it had just been lost to a competitor she had never even heard of. She called Derek Manning. The phone rang 5 times before going to voicemail. She called again. This time, Derek picked up, his voice sounding rushed. "I'm in a meeting." "What is it?" "Have you seen the email from the Department of Defense?" A moment of silence. "Yes." "Who is the new partner?" "A company called Donovan Industrial." Veronica paused. The name wasn't familiar, but something about it made her feel uneasy. "Pull their file. Get it to me in an hour." She hung up. An hour later, there was still no email from Derek. Veronica called again. No answer. She strode out of her office, down the hall to Derek's. The door was closed. She knocked, no reply. She opened the door. It was dark inside, the desk completely empty. She turned to Nina, who was standing at her own desk with a strange expression. "Where's Derek?" Nina looked at Veronica. There was pity in her eyes, something Veronica had never received from anyone. "He went home, said he was sick." "Sick? That's what he said." Veronica stood still for a moment. Then she walked quickly back to her office, closed the door, and looked up Donovan Industrial herself. The results appeared on the screen. Company founded 14 months ago. Cole Donovan. Registered business address, the Fairhaven Factory, Lowell, Massachusetts. Veronica read the name once, then twice, then a third time. Cole Donovan. The man with the beat-up truck, the man with the greasy tool bag. The man she had told, "If we have any smaller problems, we'll be in touch." The man with the 6-year-old daughter and her stuffed rabbit. That man had just stolen her $47 million contract. And he was sitting in the very factory she had sold for $11 million. She reached up to her bookshelf, pulling down an old file. The Fairhaven Property Valuation Report. She flipped to the last page, to the approval signature. Derek Manning. Veronica sank into her chair. It was all starting to make sense. 3 days later, Nina Holloway handed Veronica a thick envelope. Inside was everything she had collected over the past 14 months. The valuation report, the sales contract, a list of unusual transactions, and most importantly, a handwritten log of phone calls between Derek Manning and a man named Victor Kane, the owner of Fairhaven Asset Management, the shell company that bought the factory for cheap before selling it to Cole. Veronica read every page. With each one, the color drained further from her face. When she finished, she looked up at Nina. "Why didn't you tell me sooner?" "I did," Nina replied, her voice calm. "A year ago, I wrote a memo. Mr. Manning intercepted it." "How do you know?" "Because I left it on your desk at 7 a.m. By 7:25, it was gone. And Mr. Manning was the only other person in the office before you." Veronica was silent. She wanted to say Nina was wrong. She wanted to say Derek was the most trustworthy of all her executives. But she couldn't, because all the evidence was right in front of her. "I'm hiring an independent auditing firm," Veronica said, "and I'm suspending Derek pending the investigation." Nina just nodded. She said nothing more. She had done her part. The rest was up to Veronica. 2 weeks later, Derek Manning was fired. Not with a formal meeting, not with a polite letter. Veronica waited until the audit report was complete. A 47-page report detailing every violation, every missing dollar, every contract signed at an unusual price. She placed the report on Derek's desk, along with a white envelope. "This is your termination notice. You have 30 minutes to clear out your desk." Derek looked at her. His face was pale, but his eyes were still defiant. "You think you can keep this company without me? I kept it for 5 years before you were here. In 2 more years, this company will be bankrupt. Without me, you're nothing." Veronica didn't answer. She turned and walked to the door. At the threshold, she stopped without turning back. "Derek, do you know what my biggest regret is? That you hired me? No, I regret not listening to Nina a year ago." She walked out, leaving Derek sitting motionless at his desk with the 47-page report in the white envelope. He had lost everything. And then there was Veronica. Over the next 3 months, Ashford's 3 biggest contracts left her, one by one. Not because they hated her, but because they found somewhere better, a place with higher hair quality, more competitive prices, and most importantly, reliability. Donovan Industrial. That name started appearing in every conversation, every email, every industry report. No one knew much about it, but they all said the same thing. They're precise. They deliver on time. And they have a leader that no competitor can match. Veronica sat in her silent office, looking out the window towards Fairhaven. On the horizon, she could see the smokestacks of the old factory puffing out white smoke, a sign of a facility operating at full capacity. She remembered that morning 14 months ago. She remembered her smile when she saw the rusty sign. She remembered what she'd said. "If we have any smaller matters, we'll be in touch." She was wrong from start to finish. And the price of that mistake was becoming clear right before her eyes. In every contract, every number, every talented employee who had left because they no longer trusted their leader. Veronica Ashford, the most powerful CEO in precision component manufacturing on the East Coast, felt truly small for the first time in her life. She picked up her phone, opened her contacts, and found the name Cole Donovan. Her finger hovered over the call button for a full 5 minutes. Then she put the phone down. Not yet. She needed to do something first. 2 days later, she drove to Fairhaven. No Bentley, no entourage. She drove her personal car, a modest gray sedan, and parked it outside the factory gate where she had parked 14 months ago to laugh at Cole's sign. Now the sign here was different. Donovan Industrial. No tagline, no slogan. Just 2 words in simple black block letters on a white background. Veronica stood before the sign for a long time. Then she walked inside. Inside the Fairhaven factory, the atmosphere was completely different from the first time Veronica had set foot in it. Gone was the musty smell of abandonment. Gone were the thick layers of dust on the floor. Instead, there was the smell of fresh machine oil, of clean metal, and the steady rhythm of operating production lines. Veronica stood at the main entrance, taking in the entire space. She had stood here before, but as a different Veronica, an arrogant, rushed, and blind one. Now she saw things she had never seen before. Safety signs posted in every corner. Carefully handwritten operating instructions hung next to each machine. A small corner for children with a table and chairs, coloring books, and a stuffed white rabbit sitting on one of the chairs. Cole Donovan emerged from behind a production line. He was still wearing the same old gray shirt, sleeves rolled up to his elbows, the same safety boots with worn-down heels. The only difference, pinned to his chest where a greasy rag used to be, was a small ID card. Cole Donovan, Chief Executive Officer. Veronica stared at the card. She said nothing. Cole walked closer, stopping 3 steps away from her. A safe distance, a polite distance. The distance between 2 people who were once strangers and still hadn't truly gotten to know each other. Mrs. Ashford. Cole, Veronica hesitated. May I call you Cole? Suit yourself. Silence. Veronica looked around again. Her eyes landed on the small corner for children, the yellow table, the drawings on the wall, and the white rabbit. Your niece? My daughter, Hazel. How old is she? 6. Veronica nodded. She remembered the first time she saw Hazel in Cole's old shop. She had thought it was an inconvenience, a child in the workplace, so unprofessional. Now she saw it differently. It wasn't an inconvenience, it was a sacrifice. A single father with no one to watch his child, forced to bring her to his workplace because he had no other choice. And instead of being ashamed, he had made it a part of his life, a small, warm corner amidst the cold machinery. I was wrong, Veronica said. Cole didn't answer. I was wrong to laugh at your shop. I was wrong to let Derek Manning run my company. And I was wrong, most of all, for looking at you without ever truly seeing you model. She stopped, her voice trembled. I didn't come here to ask for your forgiveness. I came here because I need to tell you, I know who you are. Not Cole Donovan, owner of a repair shop, but the Cole Donovan who designed the 7 patents my company is currently using. The Cole Donovan who fixed my system in 2 hours and 20 minutes when 3 national contractors said it would take 3 days. And the Cole Donovan who built a factory from ruins while I sat in my office thinking I was in control. Cole looked at her. His eyes were still calm, but there was something in them Veronica had never seen before. Not hatred, not victory, but understanding. Thank you, Cole said. For what? For coming here, for saying those things. Veronica swallowed hard. She opened her handbag and took out a thick file. This is a partnership proposal. I want Ashford Precision Metals to become a supply partner to Donovan Industrial, not a competitor, not an enemy, a partner. Cole took the file but didn't open it. Are you sure? You know this means I'll have a say in your company, right? I know. And you're okay with that? Veronica looked directly into Cole's eyes. For the first time in her life, she wasn't thinking about percentages, about profits, about market share. She was thinking about only one thing. I'm okay with it because you're better than I am. And a true leader knows to put the right person in the right place, even if that place is above their own. Cole was silent for a moment. Then he opened the file. His eyes scanned the terms, a habit that never changed. I'll read it carefully, he said. And I'll give you an answer within a week. Veronica nodded. She turned as if to leave, but then stopped. Cole. Yes, your daughter, Hazel, she's a very good artist. Cole glanced toward the small corner where Hazel's latest drawing was pinned to the wall. A picture of 3 people. A tall man, a little girl, and a woman with long hair. Thank you, Cole said. Veronica walked out. As she sat behind the wheel of her gray sedan, she burst into tears. For the first time in many years, she wasn't crying because of failure. She was crying because she realized that for all these years, she had been living in a glass cage, seeing everything but unable to touch the truth. And today, that cage had shattered. A week later, Cole signed the contract. It wasn't because he needed the money. Donovan Industrial was big enough to stand on its own. He signed for another reason, the reason he explained to Arthur Pendleton as they sat in the old office, the smell of paper and walnut wood mingling in the air. I signed because she came, Cole said. She drove here alone. She apologized. She saw my daughter and didn't laugh. To me, that means more than any clause in a contract. Arthur looked at Cole over his reading glasses. You are the best man I have ever met, Cole Donovan, and I've lived long enough to say that without any fear of being wrong. Cole smiled. It was the first time Arthur had seen him smile. I'm not a good man. I just have a daughter, and I want her to be proud of me. On the day of the signing, Hazel came to the factory with Cole. She didn't understand the legal terms, the millions of dollars, or why so many adults in suits were shaking her father's hand. But she understood one thing. Her dad was happy. And as Cole sat down at the table, pen in hand, Hazel ran to his side and tugged gently on his sleeve. Daddy, I finished my drawing. Cole bent down to look at the picture, a big house, a green tree, a yellow sky, and 3 people. Her dad, her, and another lady. Who's this? Cole asked, pointing to the third person. Hazel looked up, her eyes bright. It's Miss Veronica. I drew it for her because she came to visit you. Cole stared at the drawing for a long time. Then he put down the pen, picked Hazel up, and turned to Veronica, who was standing by the door, holding a cup of coffee, her eyes red-rimmed. Would you like to see this? Cole asked, holding the drawing out to Veronica. Veronica walked over and took the picture from Hazel's hands. She looked at it, and fresh tears streamed down her cheeks. It's beautiful, Hazel, she whispered. It's so beautiful. Hazel smiled, revealing the gap between her 2 front teeth. You can keep it. Veronica hugged the drawing to her chest, as if it were a priceless treasure. Of course, sweetheart, I'll keep it forever. That afternoon, after everyone had gone home, Cole sat alone in his small office at Fairhaven. Next to him was Hazel's drawing, the original, because Hazel had drawn 2, one for Veronica and one to keep at home. He looked at the drawing for a long time. 3 people, a house, a tree. For the past 3 years, ever since Claire passed away, Cole had never imagined a future with someone else in it. He focused only on Hazel, just Hazel, and his work. But now, looking at his daughter's drawing, he was starting to think differently. Not about Veronica, but about the possibility of a better tomorrow. He placed the drawing on his desk, next to an old photograph of Claire. 2 faces, one from the past, one from the present, looked at him from 2 different places. Would you be proud of me? Cole whispered. There was no answer. Only the sound of the wind blowing past the factory's glass panes and the steady hum of machinery from the production line, the sound of a future being built day by day. Cole stood up, turned off the lights, and headed home. Hazel was waiting at home, and tomorrow a new day would begin.